Once, in ancient Egypt, there was a young man who wanted more than anything to love the night. He adored the darkness of the night and how the stars glittered in the sky, and most of all the nights when the moon was hidden and darkness was everywhere, seeping like a velvet liquid around the stones of the houses and streets. And he thought to himself, how will I spend my life loving the night, worshipping the night? And he decided to go to a great city of ancient Egypt and to become a priest in the temple of the night. And he went to the temple and he begged the priests, "Let me be one of you." And they laughed at him, and they said, "You do not know anything of our secrets or our magic. Why should we take you?" And to prove his sincerity, he cut the palm of his hand and let the blood drip onto the altar sacred to the night. And the priest's eyes grew wide and their lips curled in a smile, a dark smile, and they took him in. And they robed him in black cotton and wool and made him a priest of the night. And after a year of making him serve and sweep and clean and light incense and perform all of the duties of the temple, on the anniversary of his initiation, they took him down into the basement of the temple, through a secret door into a hidden chamber in the darkest and deepest underground parts of the temple, where the embalming took place, where those who worshipped the night and who had died were prepared for the afterlife. And the priest of the body of those who worshipped the night slit open the veins of the royals, of the nobles, and of the priests who worshipped the night, and let their blood flow out into a dark bowl. And this obsidian bowl, filled with the blood of the dead royalty who worshipped the night, was passed around, and each priest of the night sipped blood from it, and royal blood, gods who walk the earth, bleeding after their deaths into the obsidian bowl, gave life to the priests of the night, and the young man, the young priest of the night, drank, and drinking the blood became one of the priests, a vampire priest of the night. And in addition to drinking the sanctified blood of the dead, of the noblest, holiest of the dead, the priests of the night would receive sacrifice from the people of Egypt. They would take from among the spoils of war the youngest, the prettiest of slaves of conquered nations, and they would drink their blood while they lived, until all the blood was gone, was drink and was nourishment for the priests of the night, and at last the beautiful slave expired upon the obsidian altar in the basement of the temple of the night. But the young priest was not satisfied. He wanted to drink the best blood. He went searching for the best blood. And he started to creep into the houses of the nobles and to open the veins of their children. And he drank not enough to make them sick or dead, but enough to slake his thirst. And he offered his foul deeds to the night. And one night he was so bold, he crept into the sleeping chambers of the Pharaoh himself, and swirling his cape of dark black wool open to reveal his glistening body, he hovered over the sleeping Pharaoh, and his lips approached the Pharaoh's skin. And as his lips touched the tender skin of the young Pharaoh's neck, they burned, and he drew away quickly. And his cry awakened the Pharaoh, who looked at him, saw his silver insignia of the night, of the temple of the night, and laughed and said, "Stupid priest of the night, I am Pharaoh of Egypt. I am Ra incarnate. I am the embodiment of the sun god on the throne of Memphis. You have burned because you are a creature of the night, and my blood belongs to the fire of the sun." And in his laughter, the priest of the night slunk back to his temple. He bowed at the obsidian altar and apologized to the night for his profanity, and gave up his dreams of ever drinking living royal blood. And shortly after that, when his ambition had been burned to ash, he looked for satisfaction somewhere else. There was a young slave that had been brought to the temple for sacrifice. And bored one day, he spoke with the slave in his cage, and realized that the slave also loved the night. The slave had come from a land with shade and trees, and he talked about the coolness of the dark. And talking more about the night, he realized that they shared love of the night in common. And he took the slave out of his cage and brought him to his apartments. And he kept him, and he loved him. But his love could not stop his habit and his lust for blood. And one night when he and the slave had an argument, and the slave was in his fury, and he said hard words to his lover, the priest grabbed him by the throat and drenched his thirst and his anger in the blood of his lover, and drank him whole until he was dead. He did not allow his love to overcome his anger, and allowed his anger to justify his cruel action. He threw the body of his lover to the crocodiles. And after a few weeks, his anger left him empty, and he went to the slave cages and chose another lover. And the young man, desperate to preserve his life, gave all that he could in desperation to the priest of the night. What he could create of love he gave him, and he lived. And he lived in the apartments of the priest of the night. But it was not a relationship built of love. And one night they disagreed and they argued, and the priest of the night, already burned by someone he had loved, and already still festering with the anger of that lover's death at his own hands, but never having apologized or taken responsibility for that death, he let his anger burn brighter still, and he slew his new lover and drank his blood and threw his body to the crocodiles. And he grew bitter and more bitter, taking lover after lover, and each of them in turn finding a moment, as all lovers do, of heat and disagreement, and the priest of the night, flooded with darkness in his heart, slew each and drank his blood, until he had had his fill and took no more. Having sworn off these lovers, he resolved only to drink the blood of the sacrifices. But even the slaves who were sacrificed by his fellow priests, and from the obsidian bowl whose blood he drank, seemed empty to him. It was like taking a mere medicine to remain alive and immortal. One night, as dawn approached, he slunk from the temple, leaving the complex where all the temples were. He returned to his apartments, but just as he passed the gate, the priest of Ra, the priest of the sun, passed him and said, "Good morning, brother knight," and smiled. And the priest of the night was caught by the brightness of the priest of Ra, and he said, "Good morning, brother sun," and they passed. And the next day the priest of the night timed his exit and returned to his apartments, to exit when he knew it would be just before dawn. And sure enough, again he met the priest of Ra, and in passing they exchanged greetings. "Good morning, brother night." "Good morning, brother Ra of the sun." And on the third day of passing and greeting, they stopped and talked. And they talked of the love of each of their gods. And they talked of the feelings within as they performed their worship. And they decided that they should leave a little early, one from his duties and one from his home, and spend an hour at the dawn. And talking together in the courtyard of all of the temples, they resolved to spend another hour at the dusk. And in this way, they grew a friendship. And over time, that friendship turned to love. And soon the priest of the sun was spending his time, his nights, in the apartments of the priest of the night. But the priest of the night served during the night and slept during the day. And so he resolved to give over some of his duties to the other priests of the night. And little by little, week by week, he removed himself from the positions of high authority and became a lesser priest of the night with lesser duties, and was held in less regard by the other priests of the night. But he was happy staying in the arms of the priest of the sun, at night, at home. The years went by, and the priest of the night was immortal, for he still drank blood of the slaves from the obsidian bowl. But the priest of the sun, like the sun setting every day, burned through his years, burned out the youth of his body, and when his time came, he burned away the usefulness of his physical form, and his spirit was freed to return to the sun, and he died. And the priest of the night resolved, at that point, seeing that his love, even so great that he gave up his position in the Temple of Night, would pass to ash, and realizing that all his lovers had passed to ash, realized that there was no satisfaction to be had anywhere in physical form, and gave up even drinking the blood of the slaves from the obsidian bowl, and resolved never to drink blood of another. For those who could love and still pass into ash deserved his respect. But he had drunken blood for enough time that he did not die right away. And the priests of the Temple of the Night, seeing that he no longer drank the blood of the slaves, turned him out and said, "You can no longer serve here. You are not a priest of the night. You do not partake of our sacredest ritual. Go. Go and find your place elsewhere." And swearing off the drinking of all blood, this vampire priest of the night grew thinner and thinner, and people stared at him and wondered what he was, mere skin and bones. And he left the capital city to avoid their gaze and suspicions and incredulity. And he wandered the deserts. He wandered the deserts of the Sinai. He wandered strange lands, always calling to the night, "Where shall I go? Where shall I go? What is my purpose?" And during the day, he would burrow under the sand and leave his body asleep, away from the harsh rays of the sun. And he wandered into a strange land where the people spoke a language he did not understand. He had heard it in the slave cages. He had drunk the blood of some who had spoken it, but he had never known what it meant. And he wandered on the outskirts of their great city. And he wandered for a place to sleep, a place to rest, a place to hide. And he came to at last a graveyard. And he thought, "This will be my place where all lovers have turned to ash in the earth." And he rolled back the stone of one tomb and resolved to seal himself in and to stay there evermore. And he rolled the heavy stone back into place so that none would ever find him in his dark little cave. And he lay down next to the sepulchre where had been laid a fresh body. And he lay down on the ground, and he died and turned to ash, as all vampires who forsake blood or are burned by the sun do. Ash. The body that had been laid there had one arm that was near the edge of the stone sepulchre, and from that body, from the arm, from the hand, which had been wounded by the form of execution of this body, there leaked blood. And that blood ran over the edge of the sepulchre, and that blood dripped down, and that blood dripped in and mixed with the ash of the vampire priest of the night. And if you know the stories of the vampires, you know that fresh blood revives even a vampire burned to ash. And so this vampire returned to mortal form again, naked and breathing. But different, for this body had been executed on a cross of wood. And this blood had been given selflessly in sacrifice. This poor mortal who had been sacrificed by other priests and soldiers, his blood restored the priest of the night and filled his thirst forever and made him immortal. And he left the cave, rolling back the stone and replacing it again, and walked forward into the new land, and forevermore he traveled the world, always teaching people to go into the night to find the cave, and in that cave to find the redeeming, the transcending presence of the true holy. And this became the true path of those who worship the dark and worship the night and worship caves and worship inner spaces, because they know that if you go within the dark, you find the transcendent, and you are restored, and you find that within you that transcends the physical form and the ash, and is immortal and good.